I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
On this episode of Good Faith Weekly, we're going to be talking about the latest COVID issues that people of faith are dealing with. We're also going to take a deeper dive into one of our columnist articles this past week during Holy Week by Nora Lozano, entitled Lenten Lectionary Easter 2020, Can Fear, Grief, and Joy Coexist Together? So looking forward to that deeper dive. And then later on in the pod, we'll be interviewing Pastors Scott Stearman and Tiffany Triplett Henkel from Metro Baptist Church in Rauschenbusch, Metro Ministries, who are doing some incredible work in the Big Apple during this pandemic. So I want to make certain you stay tuned for that interview. Autumn, as we tend to do in this podcast, we started off by asking, are you healthy?
I'm healthy. Yeah. In fact, I just had a mobile nurse come and sit on my front porch because I wouldn't let her in the door.
Wow. Did she come all geared up? Let me ask you that.
So before she got out of her car, she had a face mask on. And I told her, listen, we have been sequestered in our house for 3.5 weeks now. Like, I promise we're safe. Plus, you're not coming into the house. So just sit on the front porch. We did a blood draw. I did come inside for the more personal elements of the test.
I would hope so. All of a sudden, you go over to Autumn's house and all the neighbors are lined up down the street.
Oh, I know. Yeah. We're in Oklahoma, but we are in residential Oklahoma. Anyway, it was just for insurance purposes, so nothing to be alarmed about. But yes, my blood pressure is beautiful. My pulse is perfect, so everything looks good.
So just even in the opening story, you posed already an interesting ethical dilemma that many of us are facing. As some of us, have to get out of the world. There's people who are still going to work. Unfortunately, they have a job where they just have to. Or some of us are going to the grocery store to grab a week or 2 weeks worth of groceries. Now, come on, let's be honest. When somebody tells you they've been sequestered or in quarantine, you kind of give them the side eye. Do you believe them? I mean, is this turning us into a society that can't trust one another?
Oh, I don't trust anyone. No. I don't.
Now, there's this adorable little thing your son does that I've seen a video of. So tell us about that.
Oh, my God.
Strangers come down the street when he's riding his bike or outside playing?
Yeah, both of our boys, they're 7 and 4. And so they have a pretty tight leash. We, let them ride their bikes we have a really quiet neighborhood. We would let them ride their bikes within like a certain parameter. And so we can still see them from the front porch of the house, but they're outside riding. And our boys are very friendly and our neighborhood is very friendly. And so at the first of this pandemic, we talked to them and told them, like, you have to stay at least 6 feet away from people. If you see someone coming on one side of the street, you go to the other side. And they weren't really taking us very seriously.
Right.
So, as is developmentally appropriate, we showed them some footage out of Italy, of the hospitals, of the military trucks carrying coffins, as you do with young children.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
And now suddenly they're taking it real seriously, which we're thankful for. But basically,
are they running into your bedroom at night screaming?
No, they've been traumatized by us before.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
But if they see now a person in the neighborhood, the 4-year-old will raise his hand and say, alert, which is alert. He doesn't have his L's. And then 11, who's 7, will say, human, stay away from us. Human, stay away from us.
Oh my gosh. When we get back in the studio, we're going to have to use those as drops on the show. Human, stay away from us. Alert.
One thing that's tricky, though, is, we're getting all these kids ready for Easter, and it's going to look a lot different this year. I mean, without all the theological element of it, Easter eggs and Easter bunnies and kids' Easter outfits for church, all these holiday traditions that make a holiday aren't going to be there. So What are we going to do?
Yeah. Easter's going to look a lot different this year from, the entire Holy Week. And of course, we could, this began almost simultaneously as Lent began. And especially now that we've arrived at Holy Week, it is going to be very, very different. Yeah. But as, we'll talk about later on in the interview with Scott Stearman, it feels a little, or at least we assume it feels maybe a little like the first century. where there is this heaviness in the air. There is this fear that has permeated our culture. And, first century Palestinians that lived during the days of Jesus could probably really relate to where we are today. And the need for hope, the need for a new beginning is just right there at everybody's beck and thought. And that's what we're needing. And so, as we work our way through this very difficult week, and certainly it's appropriate to mourn the loss of our traditions this particular year, there are some new things that can emerge from the tomb, so to speak. We've already talked to several pastors and ministers in previous episodes about how these new traditions may fit into the future of their church. I remember when we talked to David Turner and his associate in Richmond, Virginia, doing drive-in church. We asked them point blankly, do you think, one Sunday during lunch, you're going to do drive-in church when things get back to normal? And they said, most likely we're going to, just to commemorate that time. So, I think families are resilient. They're going to find new traditions, kind of try to tie those old traditions into some new traditions as this week unfolds. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, as well as I do, people are creative. They're going to come up with some amazing things.
Yeah.
What do you plan for your kiddos?
Well, I've been stockpiling Easter candy. Some people were stockpiling toilet paper, not me. I knew Easter candy was going to be at a premium. So we have bags as I sit here in my closet. If you see a Target sack, probably it's filled with Easter candy. So we're going to have a little Easter egg hunt here. I'm planning some kind of creative Easter Sunday morning pictures, so you'll have to stay tuned for those.
Oh, can't wait.
Our kids are going to participate in the Sunday service. We're going to be reading the Lord's Prayer for communion. Mm-hmm. So, there are ways that we're still going to be interacting with our faith family so that it'll feel like Easter Sunday. I know one of our holiday traditions that we are still going to be able to have is we always make a Greek feast for Easter lunch. And so we're going to be able to do that. Fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Be really nice. Well, we haven't talked a lot about what we're going to do as far as celebrating Easter anew here at the Randall House. I would imagine that, knowing my family, Jesus didn't, Missy, my wife, is convinced that Jesus would have, probably risen about mid-morning if he had met her.
She arose.
That's right. Because she's more of a, she's more of a brunch kind of lady. And,
not a sunrise service. And this is Mr.
No. I think I did sunrise services for over a decade at North Haven Church, where I was pastor here in Norman, and I think she made a total of 0 when it came to sunrise services. But she loves Easter, and I mean, really loves Easter. She celebrates with everybody else. So we haven't really talked about some of the new traditions that maybe we can begin during this coronavirus pandemic. What's going to be very special for us, though, is that we, to be honest with you, did not anticipate having any of our family home. It was just going to be Missy and I, because both of our boys are in college. They would have spent Easter weekend at college. And having the entire family together is going to be very special for us. So it's going to be interesting to see. In this week's Deeper Dive, we want to take a look at Nora Lozano's article that posted at ethicsdaily.com April the 8th, 2020 of this week. That was entitled Easter 2020, Can Fear, Grief, Joy Coexist Together? And that is such a fascinating question during this Holy Week that also really echoes the entire themes that we find in Holy Week. Fear, grief, and joy all culminate to make this a very special week for Christians around the world. Autumn, what do you think about this? I mean, especially as it relates to our current existence. Can all of these emotions be felt by all of us in the midst of one week?
I think I feel all those emotions in the midst of about 5 minutes these days.
True.
I mean, I can literally be scrolling through my Twitter and see, something humorous, and then in the next see, a friend today posted that she had her first like loss of someone that she knew directly due to COVID. And so
Right.
I think it's sort of the human nature to experience all of those things at once. I'm going to just play my little Southern lady card real quick and say it always
Yeah,
makes
sure.
me
Go ahead.
of that part in Still Magnolias after, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, it's like 30 years old. So I'm going to spoiler alert, pause it if you haven't seen it, but after Shelby dies, and they're all
What, Shelby, guys?
ah! And one of the women says, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. And it's those two like depths of feeling that are so rich. And I think it's real. I think we're all mourning the fact that we're not going to see grandparents. We're not going to see extended family. We're not going to get to see all the kids in their little Easter outfits matching. Or our older women in church who wear their cute Easter hats, and just that feeling of the church being so full and getting to see new faces and inviting those new faces to come back. So yeah, there's some mourning going on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you parallel what's going on in the world today with just the simple narrative of Easter week, as Nora has done in her article, you think about the triumphant entry of Palm Sunday and the celebration, but also the fear that began to emerge after the triumphant entry, because Jesus has made this very political public proclamation regarding his stance in the world and his position in the world as his faith tradition saw it and as the political system saw it. And they took that as an affront to the religious and political communities of the day. So fear began to sit in. I mean, fear already persisted, but it began to be heightened after the triumphant entry on Palm Sunday, because it was for certain that Jesus was about to be confronted by the establishment of the day. And then, of course, he was arrested on Thursday, taken into custody. I use the word tried in air quotes, because he really wasn't tried and convicted of treason as far as the Romans were concerned. And then that fateful day on Friday, as he was crucified at Golgotha. In Nora's article, she talks about the emotions through the eyes of the women, and in particular, the emotions of one Mary Magdalene, who was certainly a disciple of Jesus and a follower of Jesus. And we see her present during that Holy Week, and most certainly in the crowd that welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem, and the fear building as pressure began to mount. And then, of course, there on Good Friday, her presence, seeing Jesus crucified to a cross. And her and the women alone are the ones that are standing there. John puts himself at the cross, but watching Jesus, their rabbi, their mentor, their friend, die upon that cross, taking his last breath and then buried into a borrowed tomb. This, the unimaginable grief that overcame them. But then Sunday morning comes along, and it is Jesus, the risen Christ, who makes a very conscious decision to welcome his presence and to reveal his resurrection to that of Mary alone. And she's the first one to see Jesus out of the tomb. And it's this beautiful, joyful moment. And she wants to celebrate and cling to him. And he says, "Woman, don't cling to me." And it's just a very special moment, because the joy was so exuberant and overwhelming for someone who had experienced such fear and grief of Holy Week. Mm-hmm. And I see that hopefully echoing in our reality today, that so many people around the world, so many communities are suffering, are first of all fearful of this terrible, terrible disease that is inflicting much of the world, and then mourning as they bury their loved ones. In many cases, they're not even there to bury their loved ones. Strangers are having to do that for them because of fear of the illness. But there is hope in the midst of this fear. And that hope is what we cling to. That hope is the anticipated potential of a new day dawning. And as you and I have talked about before, Autumn, we're never going to be the same.
No.
This is a transformative moment within the entire global community. 9/11 was certainly like that for the United States and much of the world as they saw the Twin Towers terrifyingly come down. But this has been at the doorstep of every person around the world that has been affected by this. And it is going to be transformed globally. And it has been inspirational to see communities come together at night to thank all of the healthcare workers and first responders. It's been a beautiful thing to hear the voices of Italians and other cultures come out and sing in unity, and the relationships that have blossomed on porch steps and on balconies across the world. There is a new day dawning. There is a resurrection afoot, and that day is going to be a beautiful day when it comes. We're not there yet,
no,
but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it is going to come, and I hope this is a transformative moment for all of us around the world to hope for a better day, a better tomorrow, that we can be better as a society and as a culture, and that good faith prevails as good people do good work.
Are you looking for a new way to grow your faith? Nurturing Faith is offering 5 of their best-selling devotionals for only $12 for Good Faith Weekly listeners. Go to nurturingfaith.net to find hope from Carol Bozeman Taylor, John R. Roebuck, Blake McKinney, Michael L. Ruffin, and Merrill J. Davies. The books are all available in the bookstore section of the Nurturing Faith website. And now, back to Mitch and Autumn.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly, and this week we are very honored to have the pastor of Metro Baptist Church, Scott Stearman, and Pastor Tiffany Triplett Henkel, who is also the executive director of Rauschenbusch Metro Ministries in New York City. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. We're glad to be here.
First and foremost, how are you both doing? Now, Scott, I know you're not in New York right now, but you have been. And Tiffany, you are right in the heart of the Big Apple. So how are you all doing?
Tiffany, go ahead.
Yeah, we're doing okay. It is certainly a challenging time. I think those are probably the biggest words of understatement that can be shared right now. But we're doing okay, and we know we're really in a fortunate place compared to thousands of people in the city that are really struggling right now. But we're doing what we can as a church and as a nonprofit organization to continue to support our community. And then just on personal levels, like we're doing what everybody's kind of doing these days. I happen to be parents to 2 young kids who are remote learning, and navigating a whole new journey where that's concerned, and trying to tend to their emotional and mental needs at the same time. And so it's, it's new territory for sure. And I'm fumbling through it like probably a lot of people are, but we're trying to do our best.
I think we're all fumbling through it at this time. I was an empty nester for all but 3 months until both of my boys came back from the East Coast. So I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. Scott, how are you doing?
Good physically, thank you. Yes, doing really well. As I was saying earlier to you before the broadcast, Mitch, we had a staff person that tested positive, somebody that I had some contact with, and so I was bringing my spouse down to a house in Mississippi that we have, and learned on the way that she had tested positive, and so we had to be in quarantine. I had some symptoms for a while that were clearly the symptoms you hear about, but they were not terribly alarming. So I'm in the place with a lot of people in the United States today that feel like they've had symptoms but have no idea if they had the disease or not. So, but the good news at this moment, I feel great heading back to New York tonight.
Yeah, good. Now, Scott, you were in New York City when it started to really ramp up and started to kind of shut everything down. I know that you work closely with United Nations in New York City. And tell us a little bit about what happened, because the UN shut down and there was a big event taking place.
Right. So the Committee for the Status of Women, or Commission for the Status of Women, and they have many committees related to that, but that is something that's happened for decades and decades at the United Nations in March. And so the Baptist World Alliance originally had 20 women who were on mission from various international places around the globe to come participate in this meeting. As they have done for a number of years. Ended up 15 of them came at the same time that everything was being shut down. All meetings shut down, even some adjacent buildings to the United Nations Plaza and complex were shut down. So they had absolutely nothing to do for their time here, but they had their flights paid for and their accommodations paid for. So we tried to give them a few things to do, to learn about, and it was great interacting with them. It always is. We had folks literally from around the globe, and to hear their stories, it was very inspiring, but just one of those stories about what's going on in this chaotic period.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tiffany, you've been in New York City from the onset. Just tell the audience a little bit about how's the city doing? How's everybody coping with this, being sheltered in place? You told us a little bit about your story, but as the city as a whole, what's kind of the vibe there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a somber place right now. The death toll just in the last 24 hours went over the death toll that was the 9/11 death toll, which is kind of a pretty big symbol for the city. And I think there's a real sense of loss on a regular basis, and just a lot of the images, the naval ship Comfort coming in and seeing that come in, and watching images of the Javits Center being switched over to be this 4,000 bed hospital. It's really heavy, and a lot of the things about the city that have always brought so much levity and joy, at least in its physical form, have all had to shut down. So Broadway and restaurants and lots of the entertainment. So it's a real challenge, but I would say that New Yorkers are New Yorkers through everything, and there's also this really beautiful spirit of people who are figuring out creative ways to come together and to support one another and break through these physical, we have to keep the physical barriers, but somehow break through that on a more emotional level to find ways to connect to one another. I think one of the really cool experiences right now, and you probably have heard about this nationally, is every night at 7:00, people open their windows or go out on their balconies and they scream shouts of support and love to our essential workers, and it's especially for our healthcare workers. And their pots and pans are banging, and it's just this moment where I feel like, if other apartments are like ours, the other 23 hours of the day where we're scared and we're nervous and we're trying to figure out how to manage this, that 5 minutes at the 7:00 hour is pretty exciting and pretty encouraging. So
it's been a beautiful thing to see, no doubt.
Absolutely. And so, Tiffany, can you talk to us a little bit about your work? So many of us are working remotely, but with your type of nonprofit, that's hard to do. So how are you handling that?
Absolutely. Well, the truth is we're not completely remote. We're deemed an essential service here in the city. So when everything kind of went to no non-essential, we kept going. As Scott's already mentioned, we have had staff members who caught the virus pretty early. And of course, we were very anxious about that. And we had to quarantine most of the staff immediately. But there were a couple of us that were able to keep going. And we opened the doors at least a few hours every day in order to make sure people that had come to depend on us for food and toiletries. And even in those early days, it was still pretty cold here. We even had snow just a few days after all of the services were shut down. And so we were giving out emergency clothing. We continue to give out emergency food. We have a weekly food pantry that we have yet to shut down and do not plan to shut down as long as we can keep getting food and support for that. This past Saturday, we had 110 people show up for that. And I have had to quarantine more recently, so I was not there for that, but our amazing staff who were out for their 2+ weeks of quarantine have now, as I said, they've come out with their superhero capes on, I feel like, and have said, let's do what we can do.
Tiffany, has that been a difficult, difficult logistically? Well, first of all, have you been no problems getting food in and things like that? I know.
Yeah, a little bit. We've had a little bit of problems, but thankfully, again, our emergency food system and our food justice programs in New York City are a wonderfully organized community of folks. And so everything from like rescued food. So for example, when all of the restaurants shut down very quickly, there were organizations like City Harvest and Food Bank of New York City that are already in place to take that food that's going to go to waste because the restaurants had to shut down and find a new home for it. And then they find those new homes with folks like RMM and Metro, where we're going to be giving out food in just a few days. So they're like, can we get you all this produce that's going to go bad, or these eggs and milk? And we're like, absolutely. So we took all that, our entire basement, the first week when the restaurant shut down, just full of food. And we tried to get rid of, or get that to as many people in need in the days ahead. Now, in the previous, so just this week, we're feeling a little bit more of the concern about where we're going to get the food, because we're not getting as much rescued food, obviously, anymore. So now it really comes down to grant monies and folks who want to donate to us so that we can purchase the food. And then we're relying on the food organizations that can get us the food that's ordered. So there's a few pieces in that all have to come together, obviously, but so far we've been able to do it.
So Scott, if any of our listeners wanted to donate to RMM and just to help supply food and supplies to those that you're still ministering to under this pandemic, how would they do so?
Well, the easiest way is to go to our website. The RMM website has a direct way to donate to our food justice program. And
the
so,
website address is?
I'm sorry?
The website address is?
Yes, RMM at rmmnyc.org.
Very good. Very good.
So that's easy enough, and easily navigate some way to give.
Excellent. So Scott, we've been talking to several pastors over the last few weeks since the pandemic has begun, and talking about creative ways to minister to their congregation. How's this changed congregational life for you over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, quite radically, as it has for so many. Let me start with a little story that relates to something that Tiffany was just saying. So the day before I left with my spouse to come to Mississippi, New York, I was at the church pretty much alone because our staff was fundamentally quarantined. And Tiffany was out at that moment, and somebody came from Pret a Manger from the local one that said, we have all this food and we're closing tomorrow. Can you take it? And so I said, absolutely, we'll take it, put it in the fridge. And so they came back, and the manager wanted a picture with me, I guess for social media or something. And she leaned in and hugged me, and I think that's the last hug I've had. Well, besides Cecilia still hugs me occasionally. But anyway, I think it was just like, oh, I don't think we're supposed to be doing this.
Okay, Scott, I just have to say that you are most definitely a transplanted Oklahoman, because none of us could have said Pret a Manger quite like that. We just said like Pret a Manger. I've lived in New York. I've heard this happen with my local friends. So
yeah, well, I did spend a little time in France, so there's that.
Ooh la
la. But yeah, the congregational life, of course, has been completely transformed for us. I will say, just as an example, though, of the positive side of things, we for years I've been using Zoom, this platform for UN meetings, and so we decided when we could not meet physically, we would use that platform. And it has been a really, really right move for us. It allows for a sort of interaction that is true to us as a congregation. And of course, it may be harder in really large congregations, but in our case, it's worked very well. Allowed us to see each other's faces, to see, see our sadness and joy through all this time, and to interact in a variety of ways. So we've had services on Sundays, and devotionals midday through the week, and then some Wednesday night Bible studies, which we don't typically have every Wednesday, physically speaking. So we've had, even in some sense, greater connectivity, greater community through this period in one way. I began a few weeks ago dreading, in a sense, what Easter was going to look like. But now have come to the point where I'm pretty excited about it, because I feel like in one sense it's more like Easter really was 2,000 years ago, all hiding away in our homes, scared and bewildered. And I think there's a little bit of authenticity to this experience that if we lean into it, we can have a truly Easter moment of both authenticity and celebration.
Well said. Very well said. So obviously this has been one of those life-changing moments around the world for many people. We're still not out of it. Long way to go, to say the least. But there is going to be a day where the sun comes up and we're able to go outside and get that hug that Scott so desperately needs. What's the future look like for Metro Baptist Church and Rauschenbusch Metro Ministries? What's going to change, even in New York City? What do you think the future looks like in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think to start with some positive things, I think that the city, where it relates to emergency services, has had to figure out some things very quickly and cut through some red tape that has sort of kept us being able to provide even more support to people. So ways of getting people food in more efficient ways, and ways of connecting people. So for example, we quickly mobilized and are able to use an app called Plentiful that allows people to make appointments to come and pick up bags of food if they don't want to be in a large crowd of people on a Saturday. And a lot of organizations have just mobilized to ensure that things are getting used, and that people that need suddenly, weeks ago, nobody could imagine delivering food to all these people to their actual doorstep. And somehow we figured it out. And all it took was just this necessity of people saying, forget what we thought we had to do before. And so I'm very interested to see if we're going to be able to hold on to that sense of letting go of the things that we think can't be done in order to really support people and build community. So I hope that's where we end up after this, and that we can break through some of the things that have kept us being able to do that before. I worry, as I think probably everybody is going to worry, because New York is not unique, I think, in this case, but how we relearn to relate to one another face to face. I look at my kids right now who are dealing with being away from their friends and their social groups, and this is the stage where they learn how to socialize. So I wonder, okay, what is this going to mean for them? Are they going to be stunted, or will they have learned something new and different that they wouldn't have learned if they didn't have this experience? So I think there's a lot of unknowns, and hopefully those are more opportunities than detriments to us.
Well said. Scott?
I think we join probably every other church in the nation and maybe the world concerned about finances. What does it mean when you don't have an offering plate? And in our case, we have not only that concern, but our own model of financial support for our two organizations from the church and the nonprofit has been leasing some of our space. Leasing it to arts organizations, for example, leasing it to nonprofits, and we also have a Head Start in part of our property. So all of that has been affected by this shutdown. So, we join the rest of the world when we're worried about money, and so many of all of our Broadway people are out of work. and all our musicians, obviously. So it's a concerning time.
Yeah, very concerning. But I want you to both hear that as we look to New York City, even halfway across the country, our hearts are broken with the misery and the despair we see after 138,000 cases reported, over 5,000 deaths. But I also want you to know that we're very inspired by what we see. The city coming together. Indeed, it is the world city and America's city, and we are grateful for all that you're doing, and you're part of New York City, and we appreciate both your ministries and what you're doing for the larger Christian community. Each and every episode, we conclude with a question, and Autumn poses that question to our guests. So, Autumn, take it away.
Yeah, so Good Faith Media, our motto is there's more to tell. And we like to ask our guests to let us know what your more to tell is.
Well, I think I would start with the obvious is that this is a really dark time. Mm-hmm. But I think the more to tell is that we have beautiful stories of old, of people who have gone before us and certainly maybe haven't experienced a time just like this. But I was visiting with my spouse's side of the family last night, and we were all telling stories of older generation. We're talking about what it was like to raise children during the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about family members who were a part of the Holocaust. And these were not stories to bring ourselves down, but actually to say, these are stories of hope. And somebody shared a story about women who, were underground in Germany and during the Holocaust, who found ways to bake their matzah for Passover and smiled while they were doing it. And it was just, there were these beautiful stories of how humans find ways to come out of the darkness, and certainly with the strength of God's Spirit with us, I think we hold that as a truth before us, and we shout it from our windows and bang it from our pots and pans at night.
Love that. Scott, what's your more to tell?
I just want to I want to mention what has been mentioned by some, but I don't think it's been told enough, which is that while we humans are currently groaning, there's a sense in which Mother Nature and the earth is breathing in a way that it hasn't, maybe. And we've seen evidence of that. And so, my prayer and hope is that this story is realized by more and more of us, that we cannot continue to live as if, we as human beings are isolated from our natural context, nor that we as societies can be isolated from other societies and act as if borders really matter, because they simply do not. And so if we can tell that story again and again, then maybe this moment can be, in some fundamental way, an opportunity to shift our human consciousness about the very small earth we live on.
We've only got one planet, and we need to be taking care of it, and discovering that we are part of a larger ecosystem that should live in harmony, and given the great pleasure of taking care of God's creation. So thank you so much for that word. Scott Stearman, pastor at Metro Baptist Church, along with Pastor Tiffany Triplett Henkel, who's also the executive director at Rauschenbusch Metro Ministries. So make certain you check out their church and ministry website. And if you can, New York City can certainly use your help, especially those who are hit the hardest by this pandemic and work stoppage. Tiffany and Rauschenbusch and Metro are doing wonderful work. So check out their website and give what you can. Both of you, thank you so much. You're an inspiration to us all. God bless, and we will hopefully see you soon. And Scott, next time I see you, I'm going to throw my arms around you and give you a big old hug.
All right. Just make sure you have a mask on.
Right.
Thank you.